Good evening, everybody, and welcome to the 17th episode of the season one of Shiv Nadar Foundation Conversations. I am Sandeep Sen, currently Director, School of Engineering in Shiv Nadar University and also Professor of Computer Science. So, as the world faces unprecedented challenges today amid the COVID-19 outbreak, majority of us are dealing with something that we probably have never faced in our lifetimes, at least not in this scale and not for such a long time, with limited or no mobility at all. Of course, we can spare a thought for those people who have been forced to live in similar conditions because of other geopolitical conflicts for decades. Okay, so we are kind of there's a time to commiserate about them too, perhaps. Now, that combined with the constant bombardment of information on the pandemic can be unnerving for all of us, as all of our own constituents, like the students, the faculty, the parents, the alumni, the partners, etc., bracing the current situation in their homes, we felt it is imperative that we take some of the most unique voices in today's time directly to them and to all of you who have tuned in to watch this live today. Thanks for joining us. The Shivnada Foundation has created Conversations as a platform to bring inspiring stories of leaders from across various fields who have managed to take on tough challenges and prevailed over them with grit and hard work. In this series, we have brought you Nobel laureates, award winning authors, iconic business executives, eminent sport personalities, and renowned artists. We have so far hosted 16 guests, and their sessions have been seen by more than 15 million times. Just to name a few, we have hosted Kailash Satyarthi, PV Sindhu, the badminton player, Shubha Mudgal, the eminent vocalist, Arun Saren, ex-CEO Vodafone, and so on. We are hoping that these conversations inspire you and uplift your spirits in your time of isolation while you remain locked down within your homes. I would also like to take this opportunity to thank our friends at the Indian Express for supporting this venture and sharing Shivnadar Foundation conversations. Today, our guest is Professor Dabala Rajagopal Reddy, more popularly known as Dr. Raj Reddy. Let me give you a brief bio sketch of Professor Reddy. So, Dr. Reddy is the Moza bint Nasser University Professor of Computer Science and Robotics in the School of Computer Science at Carnegie Mellon University. Dr. Reddy received a BE degree from Gindi Engineering College of University of Madras in 1958, an MTech degree from the University of New South Wales, Australia in 1960. So we'll hear more about how we actually got there as we begin the conversations. He received a PhD degree in computer science from Stanford University. So he got all his degrees from different continents in 1966. And in between, for a short while, 1960 to 63, Dr. Reddy worked for IBM Corporation in Australia. He was an assistant professor of computer science at Stanford right after his PhD for 3 years from 1966 to 69. He joined Carnegie Mellon as faculty of computer science as an associate professor in 1969. And he became a full professor in 1973, which I believe is quite a feat because in such a short time to go all the way from a PhD student to being a full professor. And then an university professor in 1984. He served as the founding director of Robotics Institute in Carnegie Mellon from 1979 to 1991, and then as the dean of School of Computer Science from 1991 to 1999. So as some of us know, Dr. Reddy's research interests include artificial intelligence and the study of human-computer interaction. His current research interests include technology in service of society, cognition amplifiers and guardian angels, digital democracy, universal digital archive, voice computing for the 3B semi-literate populations at the bottom of the pyramid, and many other things that we are going to talk about, and these terms will be explained when we have the conversation. His professional honors is a really long list. We'll probably exhaust all the time if I go through all of them, but let me just briefly say, he is the fellow of the IEEE, fellow of the Acoustical Society of America, fellow of American Association for Artificial Intelligence, member of National Academy of Engineering, and member of American Academy of Arts and Sciences. He is also a member of the Chinese Academy of Engineering, Indian National Science Academy, and Indian National Academy of Engineering. He was the president of the American Association for Artificial Intelligence from 1987 to 1989. In 2011, he was inducted into the inaugural IEEE Intelligent Systems AI's Hall of Fame. Dr. Reddy was awarded the Legion of Honor by President Mitterrand of France in 1984 and Padma Bhushan by President of India in 2001. He was awarded the ACM Turing Award in 1994, which is considered to be the highest recognition in computer science, the Okawa Prize in 2004, the Honda Prize in 2005, and the Vannevar Bush Award in 2006. He served as co-chair of President's Information Technology Advisory Committee from 1991 to 2001. This is, of course, in the United States. He has been awarded a numerous number of honoris causa. Again, I will not read out the entire list, but let me now go over to Professor Reddy and welcome him to today's program. Good evening, Dr. Reddy, and good morning because he's in the East Coast United States. So it's a great pleasure and honor for me to have this conversation with you. And with your permission, we can start on some of the questions that I have designed for this meeting. Would you like to say something at the outset before we start the conversation?
Yes. Good evening to everyone. I don't know how many are there, but whoever is there, whether if you're in India, good evening. I hope you're able to you're not still under lockdown, and I hope we'll get out of this quickly.
Okay, so Professor Reddy, so my first question concerns your early academic career, and it's rather interesting, starting from a small village near Chennai. I believe that it's in Andhra Pradesh, but maybe at the time that you were born, it was maybe part of Madras, I don't know. As a first-generation learner in your family, which I believe was also prodded on by an astrologer, your journey to becoming one of the topmost researchers in AI has been nothing less than spectacular. It's life following fiction. So can you please tell us something about some of the twists and turns in your early career, from being trained as a civil engineer, okay, to the time you arrived in Stanford University ready to launch into a field that was about to explode, that is both computer science and artificial intelligence in particular?
Yeah. My life is kind of a classic example of luck favors the prepared mind. I had no reason to be any of those places because I come from a little village. That village is still there, 500 people, 1,000 people. And we were not that super rich or anything, but we were probably the richest in the village. And so the fact I was able to get a good education in Loyola College, that got me into engineering. It's like getting into IITs these days. Those days, IITs did not exist. In 1954, IIT Madras, I think, came up in 60 or something. But Kharagpur was there. Kharagpur was the only IIT. And I didn't know anything about IITs in those days. So never even applied. That usually tends to be the problem. If you come from a family which are farmers mostly, they don't know what the opportunities are and what you should do and where you should go or any of those things. So you kind of go from, situation to situation purely by accident of the situation of luck mainly. And that's my life story, actually.
So is it really true that, your father got an advice from the astrologer that he should support you all the way for your education?
I don't know about supporting me all the way, which he did. But the story goes that, he was a great believer in astrology. So every time a child was born, he would go to this astrologer and he would say, okay, this guy looks okay. This guy, So mostly, and apparently when he saw my horoscope, he was very excited. This is the person you need to get, he will go wherever you make him go, kind of thing. And it's surprising. I don't believe in astrology or astronomy.
Any
Astronomy,
particular
I believe
reason?
in, but
Any
not
particular
astrology.
reason that you went to Australia instead of US in the first place, or
I'm sorry?
any particular reason that you actually decided to go to Australia before you ended up in United
It
States?
was, as you know, most of us, when we graduate from undergraduate, except you're in IITs or something, we don't know what we want to do. We wish we had a job, and we try to get a job, which I did. But a few of the students at Gindi were saying, "Oh, there is this internship opportunity for fresh graduates in Australia," and so 3 or 4 of us applied, and we were selected, and that's how we ended up in Australia. Not because it's and those days they used to have something called Commonwealth fellowships and things like that. This was not one of
Right.
those. It is similar because Australia was in the Commonwealth of British Commonwealth, and we were
And the
given.
civil engineering to the computer science transition, was that something difficult or came naturally?
Again, all of these are purely, I was working. I was there as an intern. I was working, and I was actually going to University of New South Wales for a master's degree at the end of the year, and that was in civil engineering, structural engineering, the degree, original degree. And my boss said, "Oh, you're going there. By the way, there is this new thing called computers that people are using in structural analysis. Maybe if you come across it, you won't be surprised." And that's how, when I heard the name computer from my advisor, was the head of the department, he said, "I'm going to go to the computer center this evening. Why don't you come along?" I was prepared, mentally prepared. This is what I mean. Louis Pasteur said, "Luck favors the prepared mind," and in particular, I was recently reading the book a second time, and after, called "The Making of the Atomic Bomb." The first 20% of the book is about the prehistory. It's very interesting to see how some people, there at all times, there are 3 or 4 laboratories and 3 or 4 groups working on similar things. And one of them kind of saw this abnormality and then decided that to investigate it. The others were kind of, not paying attention to it, and they lost out. They were barely on the. They could have invented all the 4 breakthroughs, except the French group only invented the one, for which then they got a Nobel Prize. But in general, that was the whole issue of Louis Pasteur, namely the germ theory of disease. He wasn't looking for it. It was something that happened in the petri dish, and then he said, this shouldn't happen. What is this? And that whole thing led to germ theory of disease. So I just happened to be in the graduate program in University of New South Wales when this new computer, which is a completely vacuum tube. At that time, 1958-59, the computers were all vacuum tubes, and the memory was mercury delay line memory, and so I just looked over the shoulder of my professor. He was programming, this matrix language, and he would think aloud as he's doing it. So I was following it, and at the end of the night, he said, "Oh, now that you know what to do, beginning tomorrow, you can do the programming and run the experiment, so I don't have to go to the computer center." So that's how I became. And once I graduated from the master's program, I didn't want to do civil engineering anymore. And so I ended up joining IBM and became a applied science representative, and that was the beginning. And then after a few years, when I was thinking about doing a PhD, it was natural to kind of do a PhD in computer science. At that time, there was no computer science departments. The first computer science departments were started in end of 1964, 65. That was mainly Carnegie Mellon and Stanford. Places like Berkeley and MIT had a much stronger electrical engineering departments. They said there's no such thing as computer science. It's part of electrical engineering. So it's one more special case of it. And so they're still, it took Berkeley another 30 years to set up a separate computer science department. And MIT only set up a school of computing in the last 4 years. Before that, it was still EECS, and it's a very interesting development. So I was fortunate to have been at the beginning, even before when the computers were still computers, and I was.
My next question, Professor Reddy, that you are. I mean, I can see that you are saying that you are in the right place at the right time to usher in a new field that is capturing the imagination of many, namely artificial intelligence. So I just want to have your sense of this waves of AI that started coming in from the early 60s. There's a rise and fall and again a rise. And you have been in the company of some of the early legends of the area, including a PhD doctoral advisor, John McCarthy, who's probably coined the name artificial intelligence. Then there was Ed Feigenbaum as a young faculty member in Stanford. And then later, colleagues such as Herb Simon, Ellen Newell in CMU. So can you give us some historical sense of the various phases that the AI has been through, including the one that you pioneered in CMU as a part of the Robotics Institute, and many other specialized research centers that you set up. So if I were to quote McCarthy himself, he felt that AI in the beginning, was a lot about over-ambitiousness. And that was the early trait of AI. So when did it all start coming together? So was it related to mainly the computers getting much faster and things like that?
Yeah. So the early papers on AI is a kind of Turing's paper on intelligence in the 1950s. And the Dartmouth Conference and the papers by Newell and Simon and Minsky and McCarthy in 56, all of them, especially if you read Turing's paper, he was not interested in computers that can see and hear and things like that. He says that's not important. Can we make computers to be intelligent means they must do things that PhDs do or something like that, prove theorems and play chess and do things that what normally is considered intelligent behavior among people. And so the first group of people from 1956 to 1963 were primarily working on, there was some early work on hand-eye systems at MIT and also at, so the DARPA started funding AI in 1963. This is the first time that there was an explicit recognition of the field and significant funding to MIT, Carnegie Mellon, and Stanford. MIT because Minsky was there, Carnegie Mellon because Newell and Simon were there, and Stanford and I happened to be in 1963 a fresh graduate student at Stanford, and that meant I was there right at the beginning of AI research. The difference is by that time the definition of intelligence has changed. Namely, it was not so much intelligence; it is, can we get computers to do things that human beings do? Anything that a human being does, can a computer do? And what can we do and what can we not do? So the project that McCarthy gave me in 1963 was, we got this PDP-1, it has an A to D converter, you can digitize speech, see if you can build a speech recognition system. And I did, and it took me a month or two build a vowel detector. And then I thought, well, maybe in a few years we'll solve the problem of speech recognition. 50 years, 60 years later, we still haven't fully solved the speech recognition problem, although we have done amazing things that I didn't think it would be done in my lifetime. Namely, if you look at Siri and other existing speech recognition systems, speech understanding systems, their performance is amazing. That is, it's unlimited vocabulary. It's what we call unrehearsed spontaneous speech from open population. Any one of those things is very hard. If you rehearse speech and you're reading, that's much harder, easier. Spontaneous speech, you have ums and ahs and all kinds of things, that's much harder. And open population is really hard because there are all the dialects and people and voices and men, women, different accents, and it's almost impossible. So even as early as 2005, I used to, if you go back and listen to some of my talks, I would say, we don't know how to do unrehearsed spontaneous speech in open population. It may not happen in my lifetime, but now, after 15, 20 years, we are there. We still make a lot of mistakes. So if you turn on the speech recognition on YouTube, you'll see all the mistakes that systems, technology are making today. And we are not there yet. But the errors that they're making are the kind of errors human beings make also. That is, when we are hearing, if we're not paying attention or the quality of the sound is not good or there's noise in the background, we make all kinds of mistakes. And the mistakes that systems are making are very similar. The thing that is amazing to me, I'm sorry I'm going off on a tangent. We now are able to go speech-to-speech translation. That is, I can speak in Telugu, and you can listen to in Hindi, and you can speak back in Hindi, and I will immediately hear it in Telugu, instantaneously in real time. And this has been demonstrated for more rehearsed.
Okay. At the UN, do they use such systems?
Yeah, absolutely. For example, one of the things I recommended to the Ministry of IT is, if there is one country that needs speech-to-speech language translation, that's India. We have 22 languages. Almost every country by fiat, China by fiat says there's only one language. Everybody has to learn that. And that's also true of many other languages. But the great thing is, if we have 100 million hours of speech in any language, and about 100,000 hours of speech and 100 million words of text, then we can build a speech-to-speech translation system.
Yeah. So we are running a little short of time, so I'll ask you some very simple question, which will be of interest to the young viewers. So, how do you see CS and AI sort of panning out in future? Like, most students want to study CS these days because they are interested in AI and machine intelligence. But would this basically be necessary in near future? Do you consider AI to be more of engineering and CS to be closer to science? Of course, science and engineering cannot be separated. So how much of traditional CS does one need to basically get trained in the areas of AI and
ML? So basically, to me, computer science has become one of the fundamental science and technologies that every person should know. In fact, we used to talk about computational thinking to be introduced into high schools and primary schools so that the children know about the vocabulary and what that means. And even things like recursion can be demonstrated in primary schools. And not because they're going to become computer scientists, but it's just a concept, a way of thinking about things, right? And computer science should become like reading and writing and arithmetic, and everybody should know it. Whether you're going, and this is what led MIT to set up the School of Computing. Finally, there has come a realization in everywhere that no matter what field you're in, that field is going to be revolutionized because of computer science and technology. The new inventions and new discoveries that will be made, and the best example of that is biology, and the whole decoding of the genome and the DNA and understanding of immunotherapies and all kinds of things would never have been possible without computer science and the algorithms of computer science. So that's actually happening in almost every field: music, art, and various fine arts and literature and everything. Every field, if you go to look at that field, you'll find people using computers to make new discoveries and new breakthroughs. And the main thing that has happened in AI in the last 15, 20 years is computers that can learn with experience. And this was something that was talked about in the 20th century AI, but none of us did anything. And there was one young professor at Carnegie Mellon called Jeffrey Hinton, who had this neural network-based intelligence, and but computers were not fast enough, and he needed computers that are million to billion times faster to demonstrate his ideas. And since 1980 to 2010, he got that power of a million times more power. And with that, we now have the era of big data based AI. What we are discovering is there are patterns in language, patterns in data, patterns in weather, patterns in anything that are not possible for human brain to comprehend, because they're looking at huge amounts of data, literally petabytes of data. This is what Herb Simon, who got a Nobel Prize in economics, but his main area was AI and cognitive science, said, namely, most of us, when faced with large amounts of data, cannot cope with it, don't know how to deal with it. So what we end up doing is what we call satisficing, find a good enough solution. We don't try to find the optimal solution. And that's what the whole experience has been. Now with computers a billion times more powerful than the ones we started with, all of a sudden we now have the ability to discover patterns in weather, within genomes and language and art that are there, but we couldn't comprehend them. With that discovery, now suddenly it becomes possible to create new knowledge that did not exist before, and then use that knowledge to solve new problems that could not be solved before. The classic example I give is the simple invention of multiplication and zero by Indian mathematicians. For 3,000 years, people were, Babylonians and everyone was using numbers. They had digits, but they couldn't do multiplication. They couldn't do addition easily. They needed the concept of zero as one of the, and they had it, but they didn't know how to use it. So between 4000 AD to 1000 AD, 400 AD to Indian mathematicians formalized the concept of zero, and then came algorithms for multiplications and division and so on. Before then, it was all kind of rule of thumb. They didn't know how they did it, and so that's what we are waiting for. Namely, there are a lot of things we do, the way we see, the way we walk, the way we understand each other. A lot of things we do, we don't have algorithms for them. We just do them because the brain somehow organizes itself. And my hope is in the next 3,000 years, we will create algorithms for many of these things where you can get precise behavior from, on each of these things, which are now done purely intuitively. And so that is a great opportunity for science, namely. People keep using the word big data. It's not clear when they use the word big data, they're understanding everything. All that it means is if you can collect data from, to me, if you take COVID problem we're running into, if you can collect data from every person on the planet, every minute, then there will be no COVID problem. You can immediately detect what, who has it, and, kind of quarantine them, and everybody else can go about without any worry. So we don't have to lock down the economy. We don't have to do any of the things that we're doing. But there are issues with it. Namely, if you can track everyone, every minute, that's what Arogya Setu is trying to do now, right? Because with the contact tracing app, if you want to travel anywhere, you have to download the app. And therefore, everybody somebody knows where you are every minute of the thing. That is violation of your privacy. And Supreme Court of India has said that is no. But this is where we are at this Hobson's choice, namely, if you don't do it, a lot of people will die. If you do it, we will have privacy violations. So how do we find an acceptable medium in between? And I think this is no different than societal mediums in the past of what you can and cannot do. You cannot steal somebody's property. And if you did, you went to jail, right? And we may have to kind of have social and legal norms for privacy, where if somebody breaks them, they have a price to pay, so that we can collect the data, but at the same time maintain some privacy. But right now what happens is, in some countries there's no privacy. In India we have privacy, again, because Supreme Court says it so, but there's a lot of information we collect that even, things like WhatsApp, everything you say, everything you said ever is recorded. And they say that it's not recorded. Ideal situation would be the minute it's spoken, if it is destroyed, then it won't be there at all. But they're not doing that. They essentially, all the WhatsApp telephone calls are recorded and stored in Facebook archives. And the question is, who has access to it? Is it private property? Obviously, it is private property because you sign an agreement saying, by using WhatsApp, you're hereby, permitting Facebook to record and use the data any way you want. Same with Google. Same with Microsoft.
So, Professor Reddy, let's move over to some of the questions from the audience. If I were to sum up what you said, maybe pervasive computing with AI seems to be the way to have total control on all these situations, right? For public health and any other disasters and things like that.
Yes.
So the first question is from Bhuvan. The question says, Though a common and the person is asking that how risky is the combination of AI and robotics in future?
Not just AI and robotics. In general, all knowledge is dangerous. When they invented gunpowder, they changed the way wars are fought, right? And when they invented chemical engineering, chemistry, in the First World War, they started using poison gas to kill people, So in general, the issue turns out to be, because you can create poison gas using chemical engineering and chemistry, do we banish chemistry and chemical engineering? No. There are so many positive, good things that have come out of it, including pharmaceuticals and medicines and so on, and many other things like simple soap. Kind of. We would all be smelling a lot worse if we didn't have soap. So the issue is that kind of knowledge is always can be used both for good and bad. And the only way societies have dealt with it is by systematically passing laws saying use of poison gas is prohibited globally, and if you do it, then there'll be sanctions. There might even be war, other kinds of things. The same with nuclear power, right? Weapons of mass destruction. The U.S. went to war against Iraq because they had weapons of mass destruction, which they're not supposed to. But it turned out they never had them. But that was the assumption when they went in. So I don't have a solution that this will be a threat. This can be a threat, but my feeling is the potential benefits to society will be 99%. The dangers to society using robotic, war maybe there. In fact, I used to say in some of my early talks on robotics, I would love to not to have to go fight a war. I'll send my robots to fight with your robots, and they can fight it out, and whoever wins is the winner. And
The
so
RoboCop.
Robo Soldier, and those things are all kind of theoretical and wish list. But in general, if I had very powerful robotic weapons and you don't, then you're toast. And that's always has been the case. Those people that understood speed, like had horses, were able to defeat the people that had elephants. And that's how India lost its sovereignty long ago.
Okay, so Saurabh Adhikari says hi to you, and he asked, he would love to know what is the next big technology wave that will sweep the world.
There are three answers to it. There's a near term, medium term, and long term. In the near term, we know what can happen, right? Namely, in every field there will be advances. And to me, my two favorite technological advances that will help society is helping the 2 billion people who are illiterate. It turns out, even if I'm illiterate, if I have a smartphone with me, I can do anything that a PhD can do these days. In particular, I may not be able to read or write, but I can say, read the newspaper of today, or I can communicate with anyone, even if I can't read it or anything. I can read books. and I can have all kinds of. So the issue of um, empowering the 2 billion people who are illiterate. They may be literate. That is, a lot of people in India can read and write the language, but if you gave them a paragraph in the newspaper and say, "What is this paper saying?" Newspaper paragraph, they can't explain to you. So it's kind of it is not illiterate in the literal sense of the word, but semi-literate. They can read, but they can't understand. And so all those people can now be empowered. That is the technology I hope can be done, and we know how to do it. It's just a question of how do you make everybody to have a smartphone. I don't know if you haven't done the calculation, you should. The cost of shutting down India for 2 months is of the order of 20 lakh crores. With one half of that, we can buy everybody in India a new smartphone. And given the situation, that would also help with future COVIDs of the future, because we know what's happening. We can, in fact, essentially deal with it. So I think the governments of the world have to rethink about what is the right thing to do. Is shutting down the whole country and keeping social distancing the right thing to do, or can we use technology to reduce or eliminate the need for such shutdowns in the future? I firmly believe it can be done.
So you kind of answered the next question from Devashish Das. So he's interested to know it's not about managing when COVID hits us, but can we preempt it? Can we predict these kind of black swan events?
Yeah, and I believe we can. And my assumption is everyone has a smartphone. Let's say they don't. These days, Arogya Setu says, if you don't have a smartphone and you haven't downloaded the app, then you go into a different line. It may take you 2 hours to validate, and you may not even be able to travel. So all travel by plane or train or bus may be prohibited in the future for people that don't have it, because you can't do contact tracing of them, right? And Arogya is already requiring it. So in general, if we have contact tracing apps, and in general, it is easy enough to build new kind of phone which combines the features of a smartphone along with the smartwatch, which is able to kind of measure your blood pressure and heartbeat and all kinds of other things. And so your life support. So suddenly, I don't even have to ask you anything. I know exactly what your temperature is. I don't need temperature tracing because the smartphone that I have will do it. If I don't have a smartwatch, we need to begin to do is design a new kind of smartphone that has the smartwatch sensors in the back. And then all I have to do is touch that to the hand, and then you have your all the healthcare related apps that Apple provides with the watch. And Shwetak Patel of University of Washington has done amazing things with sensors on the smartphone, and he's able to essentially do significant healthcare monitoring, including oximeters and blood flow and blood pressure and all kinds of things, without anything better than a smartphone. So I think we are there. And if the government of India were to kind of say all future phones must have the temperature detector and blood flow, heart rate detector on each phone, they'll happen within a year. And as soon as you have them, then you don't have to have thermal sensing in the airport. Anyone that has it immediately, it can be detected, and they can be stopped at home before they even leave, saying you cannot travel today, and once you get better, you can travel. So I think the technology is there. So many of the solutions that are needed for today's problems can in fact be done. While we are waiting for these new technologies, there are simple things that can be done, namely this business of shutting down the whole economy is for the bird. I think that's the technology that was invented in 1600s or 1500s during the plague. Social distancing, saying since we don't know how to deal with it, we're going to, everybody's going to go into quarantine. And that's what happened to Newton when he was locked up in his house for 6 months or a year, when he invented all the, calculus and everything else. And so the important thing, I think, for us is even, the main factor is this, what is called the R naught, the reproduction and the spreading factor. If the number of people I'm infecting is less than one, then the whole virus will die automatically. If it is more than one, if it goes to 1.1, it grows exponentially very quickly. After 20 touches, you're out of control. So the trick is, how do we get the population not to be in contact with each other? And that can be done any number of ways. And I think the current travel restrictions and other things are the right way of doing it. We don't need to shut down the economy. We don't even need to. It turns out the people that suffered during the shutdown are all the poor people. If you happen to be rich and you didn't need to go out of the house, the poor people, migrant workers, could not, their salaries were cut off. They had no money. They had to go home. And they couldn't go home. They started walking 1,500 miles from Andhra Pradesh to Bihar. So it's kind of crazy that those kinds of things are only affecting the poor people, not the rich. And so I think now we understand the consequences. I'm sure that all the countries, especially India, will do much better in the future. Already, even if we simply had the current travel restrictions on day one, we may not have needed the total shutdown of the country. That we don't even have to stop flights. You can fly as long as you don't have the following symptoms.
Okay, so the next question comes from Shrikant Pallavur. So his question is about your views on adopting ethical aspects to AI/robotics. Is it feasible? And are there any suggested ways?
Absolutely. We have, the important thing is, as a society, we also have to teach everyone ethical and moral aspects. Indian philosophy already does that, but not everybody goes through formal education in Indian philosophy. So we don't always know what is dharma and nyaya and all of those things, but they're there. And the issue is, assuming we want to follow ethical behavior in society, the same thing would apply to any technology, any knowledge, including AI and robotics. So what we need to then say is, if you're going to build a robot, if you're going to build an AI that could violate nyayam and dharmam, then there should be restrictions on it. And if you don't follow the restrictions, you might be subject to all kinds of punishments by the government. So we need legal, and in addition to simply relying on Hindu philosophy and Hindu dharma, we need to be able to, you have a carrot and a stick. You need to realize that if you violate something, if you kill somebody, or if you steal something, then there are punishments, there are consequences that you have to do. And we need to do the same thing for AI and robotics, and more broadly technology, and more broadly all of science and technology and knowledge.
So here's a question that wants to test the limits of AI and machine learning. The question comes from Rakesh Verma. He says, how close are we to solving this problem? Read a chapter in a book and answer the questions at the end of the chapter. I'm sure the students will love it.
Right. Now, this was one of the grand challenge problems I mentioned in my 1989 presidential address of AAAI or AI. Sadly, we are not yet there, but we are making progress. Basically, there are brute force solutions. Like when you look at what the AI's IBM's Watson did when it played
Kasparov.
Jeopardy. Yeah, no, not Kasparov was the chess. The Jeopardy thing, where you would ask a question, and the computer has to understand that question and answer it, right? And the way they solved it is kind of brute force, essentially, kind of read all the web pages anywhere in the world and then try to understand. And it was mainly keyword-based answering of the questions. And so when you looked at the errors that the system made, they were all because of the lack of understanding of finer aspects of language. There are a class of things, if you go to Google and type Winograd schema, there are a set of sentences where by simply changing one word, the complete meaning is lost. It's changed, and so so it's not. We don't understand enough of language, enough about the ambiguities of the language, so that you can very quickly resolve that ambiguity. The classic example we used to give is something like this: I'm banking on you to bank at ICICI Bank near the river bank. So the adjacent words communicate the meaning of what I am intending for the word bank. Banking on you is different than ICICI Bank, is different than river bank, right? And as soon as I give you the context, you know the intended meaning. And in the last 5-7 years, there have been significant advances in that aspect of it, called transformers or research, where what they started with is essentially to take long sentences and remove a word and say, fill in the blank. What is that word? And it turns out if you don't fully understand the context, you can't always fill it in with the correct word. And this is very active research at this point. A lot of people are trying to do it. And it's very, So I think in the long run, reading a chapter in the book, I think we may get there within the next 5-10 years. What that means is there's no such thing as absolute read a chapter and answer the questions. Even human beings, given such a problem, will make some mistake. They might answer 90% of the questions, 95% of the questions. The same thing will happen here. So, for example, one of the things that AI2, Allen Institute for Artificial Intelligence, they recently had a breakthrough, I believe in you have to go look at them, where the question was, another aspect of answering the questions at the end of the chapter is, can you take a high school exam? And so Paul Allen, who was interested in this problem, spent $40-50 million in research groups and to see if they can take an AP biology exam and answer the questions at the end of the chapter, or answer the question. And I was on a review committee, and I told Paul Allen, I said, look, we don't even know how to answer questions of 8th grade science book. Forget about 8th grade, 10th grade biology book. Why don't you see if you can answer the questions at the 8th grade science book? So you have to walk before you can run. You have to crawl before you can walk. See if you can do the simplest things. So if you were thinking about doing research in India, the question would be to start with NP, NCERT, and NCERT books, textbooks from first grade onwards. So before you go to the second grade books, take the first grade books and see if you can answer those books questions. And we are not there yet, because a lot of that requires common sense. And even a four-year-old has common sense. They know if you kind of put a glass at the end of the table, it might fall down. Therefore, you have to kind of find a stable place. And a computer may not have that background, and so it'll make many mistakes of that kind. By the way, if you haven't, I used to have a reference for this work of AI too, but I'm sure if you go there, you'll find it. Otherwise, I can send Dr. Sen a link to the papers that they published on this particular question. What they were able to do is by building in more capability into the language understanding and ambiguity detection, they were able to get 90. They went from D to A in 8th grade exams, national exams, so New York State University state exams. When they took the test in 2015, they got a D. When they took the same test in 2018, 2019, they got an A. That means they went from 60% to 90%. They were able to. How did they do it? What are all the advances they had to make in order to get there? Very interesting case study.
So it appears that the AI-based or machines or ML-based machines will need to graduate from the standard 1, 2, and so on and so forth. Right? It will take its time.
Yeah, one step at a time. A more challenging one is supposing a child does not know how to read a book, right? But so you take a kindergarten child, put them in a classroom, and then you give them a homework and say, do this. Though somehow they have understood what the teacher said and understood the assignment and did the problem. So can we have a robot or AI in the same classroom listening to the same teacher and answer the same questions the same day and submit it next morning? That would be a very challenging problem, and it's a great research problem.
So I'm afraid we are coming to the end of the designated time. So we need to wrap up now. So there are some more questions pending. So what we'll do is we can send these questions to Professor Reddy, and he can actually answer them offline. He had offered to take those questions offline. So we have come to the closure of another very interesting episode. So thank you, Professor Reddy. Thank you all the audience, for being with us. This has been a truly inspiring and interesting conversation. And I'm sure everybody who logged for this session found their own set of learnings and inspiration from your remarkable journey. So it has been an honor to host you, and I would like to remind the viewers that this conversation will continue to be available on SNF Foundation's Facebook page. And some of the upcoming ones are also very interesting. I'm sure you won't like to miss this. So thank you again, Professor Reddy, and good evening and good morning, good afternoon to all the viewers from wherever you are. It was indeed a pleasure and honor to host you, Professor Reddy.
Thank you.